Chapter 4 A Surge of Information. G'day everyone, Rune here, and this is Chapter 4 of my What If Ash Became a Pokemon Ranger series. Just a little forewarning, from this video on I'm not going to be doing recaps for any of my videos. This is because they take about 3 to 5 minutes in every video, which can be better spent on the story itself. So from here on, I'm really going to be leaning into the audiobook inspiration and just reading out the title and giving a quick reminder of where to find the earlier chapters. Everyone got it? Good. Let's begin the next chapter. After some time, our group of heroes finally arrive in Vermilion. Before Gary heads off to the gym, Ash suggests that they give Oak a call to let him know that they're all okay and give him an update on everything. Gary says it's a good idea, though maybe they should leave out the stuff about Team Rocket. He doesn't want to risk giving his grandpa a heart attack. Arriving at the center, they give the professor a call. Oak is thrilled to hear from his two favorite boys and is even more happy to hear that Ash now has a partner of his own. He admits that it was probably for the best that Ash didn't take one of the starters, as he had completely forgotten that there were going to be 2 other trainers starting their journeys that day. Your memory is like a sift, Gramps. Oak laughs in embarrassment, while saying that he's just glad that the 3 official trainers got their starters before the thief showed up. Confused, Ash asks Oak what he's talking about, and Oak explains that the night after Gary and the other trainers began their journeys, someone broke into the lab and stole one of his reserve Pokemon. Gary asks which one, and Oak tells him it was Pikachu. Pikachu? You mean the Pikachu that even Ash couldn't get to behave? That Pikachu? At Oak's confirmation, Gary bursts out laughing. If Ash, Mr. Talks to Pokemon and has them eating out of his hand, couldn't get that Pikachu to listen, then that thief doesn't stand a chance. He would pay money to see the look on the thief's face after the yellow menace shocks them into oblivion. Misty mutters to Ash, making sure that Oak can't hear, that Gary shouldn't be laughing about this. What if the thief was Team Rocket? Ash points out that if it was Team Rocket, they would have taken a lot more than just one Pikachu. Bidding Oak goodbye, the group make their way to the gym, Gary wanting to get his next badge quickly so they can continue on. Entering the gym, they are quickly greeted by the gym leader, Lieutenant Surge, who is a lot less goofy and obnoxious than his anime counterpart for reasons we'll get into later. As the giant of a man greets his new trainer, Ash notices that Crystal and Lustre are staring at Surge intensely, like he's some kind of puzzle that they're trying to figure out. Before he can question it, Gary steps up to the plate, ready to try for his next badge. Unlike in the anime, this battle is 3-on-3, with the first Pokemon being Magnemite for Surge and Gary's Oddish, which has been named Merigold. This battle is tough, with both Pokemon resisting the other's attacks, but with Marigold's attacks healing her, they do manage to win in this round. Next is Argus' first Electabuzz. This one Surge thinks is going to be an easy win until Argus pulls a gotcha and sets up a Calm Mind before hitting Electabuzz with Swift. From the sidelines, Misty comments how Gary seems to be a little over-prepared for this battle. To which Ash responds that Gary is only trying for the badges because it's what started their journey in the first place. Gary wants to get it over with because he's more worried about Team Rocket now. The final round is Surge's Raichu against Cadmar. This battle is very difficult thanks to Raichu's massive bulk, but remember, Cadmar had survived for days, if not months, sitting on a rock being attacked by wild Pokemon with little food or shelter. These experiences made him very durable and almost impossible to knock down. So, after a long battle, Gary's team claims victory and Gary is presented with the Thunder Badge. Before they can leave, however, Lustre and Crystal pad up to Surge and sniff him before giving a series of happy yips. Looking down, Surge's eyes widen as he recognizes the 2 Pokemon. Confused, Ash asks if Surge knows Crystal and Lustre. Surprised with the names, Surge says that he's crossed paths with them in the past and asks how the group knows them. As the group explains their run-ins with Team Rocket, Surge's eyes widen in horror. He considers asking the kids to leave Crystal and Lustre with him, thinking it would be safer, but after giving it a second thought, he dismisses the idea completely. The kids became involved the moment they stepped in. Heck, Misty was involved before she decided to meddle with Team Rocket. Even if they left Crystal, Lustre, and even Gyarados with him, Team Rocket would likely continue to target them for the sheer principle of the fact that they'd opposed them. Besides, the two Pokemon, who are currently happily bounding between him and their new trainers, to allow these kids near them, let alone name them, Crystal and Lustre must really trust these kids. It was best if they stayed with them for now. But that didn't mean Surge couldn't give them some information. Taking the kids to his living room at the back of the gym, Surge gets everyone some tea and has them sit down. This was going to be a long conversation. Surge explains that several years ago he was a member of Team Rocket. He'd joined shortly after the war when he was angry and full of resentment. He was angry at the world that he felt wronged him, and felt like any control he had over his life had been taken from him. That was when he was approached by an old friend who told him of an organization that was looking for talented trainers and fighters like him. Said that they were going to rebuild what was lost in the war. He was well on his way to becoming one of Rocket's top members until he discovered what they were doing. He barely managed to make it out of there by the skin of his teeth, and then went straight to the cops for backup. But by the time they got to the place he'd been stationed, they'd burned it all to the ground, leaving no evidence. He worked with the cops for a time to try and track them, but it soon became clear that all of his information was quickly becoming outdated, and that was the half that wasn't completely wrong. Surge believes that the only reason Rocket hasn't come after him is because they know how little he actually knew about the organization and didn't view him as a threat. Plus, he's a renowned gym leader. It would be more trouble than it was worth. Ash asks what it was that Team Rocket was doing, and, with a deep sigh, Surge begins to explain. The place that he'd been stationed at, what he'd thought was a shelter for homeless Pokemon, was actually an underground genetics lab. Team Rocket had been conducting dangerous and painful experiments on Pokemon to try and manipulate evolution, typing, and even discover cloning. Crystal and Lustre were the only Pokemon he'd been able to free before he'd been forced to escape. He's glad that they found some people that they can trust. Ash asks about the friend that Surge had mentioned that had introduced him to Team Rocket. Surge sighs before explaining that, last he heard, his friend was still among their ranks. He has no idea how he ever got mixed up with them, but he's still holding out hope that he can get his friend out of there. Though he hasn't so much as spoken to him since he left. Before they leave, the group tells Surge about how Brock is also looking into Team Rocket and gives him his number. With another ally, our team of heroes continue on. Before continuing on to the next town and the next gym, our group of heroes make their way to the Vermilion port where the SS Anne is docked and waiting for its ticket holders. They arrive just in time for the final call for ticket holders and board before it pulls out of the port. After partaking in some battles and food, they are soon approached by people wanting to know about Crystal and Lustre. This inevitably leads to some wanting to trade, which they both turn down as politely as possible. Wanting to get away from the noise, Crystal wriggles out of Ash's hold and runs out of the room, Ash right behind her. Gary and Misty stay in the main room, wanting to give Ash and Crystal some peace from the ruckus. That and they were surrounded by so many people they couldn't follow even if they wanted to. Just as things seem to be quietening down, a loud explosion echoes from deeper within the ship, causing everyone to jump. This is then followed by a large number of the ship's staff and partygoers removing their outer layer of clothes to reveal white and black uniforms, all emblazoned with a red R. The Rocket grunts demand that everyone hand over their Pokemon, only for Gary and Misty to immediately begin rallying the other passengers to fight back. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the ship, Ash and Crystal are very lost in trying to find their way back to the party room. After Team Rocket is defeated, the evacuation of the ship begins, and Gary and Misty realize that Ash and Crystal still haven't come back. Worried that their friends are trapped somewhere on the ship, they begin to search the lower floor for them. Eventually, they find each other and begin to make their way to the lifeboats, but it's too late. The ship capsizes, sending the group tumbling into one of the nearby cabins and knocking them out cold. Sometime later, a group of heroes wake up to find themselves trapped underwater, with the ship perched precariously over a deep ravine. From there, the events don't change until the group comes across Jessie, James, and Meowth, which prompts this little exchange. Of course, of all the people we could have gotten stuck on this tin can with, it had to be you three. Well, I could use some stress relief anyway. Gary, wait! Despite Ash's attempts, the attempted fight with Team Rocket does still happen, with everyone sliding from one end of the ship's hull to the other, until Ash finally snaps at them to recall their Pokemon before they send the ship even further underwater. After everyone does, Ash is the one to suggest that they work together for now, though it's clear from his face that he really doesn't want to. He tells Team Rocket that if they even look at Crystal or Lustre in a way they don't like, they will regret it. With that, the Tens Alliance begins, and Jessie, James, and Meowth start to quickly realize that these three kids don't just dislike them, they absolutely hate them. Which really confuses Rocket because they haven't had that many interactions with the tweens. The upside down room with fire is a non-issue, as Gary simply has Argus teleport them across the gap in small groups. Once everyone is in the engine room, Ash voices his worry over Crystal being submerged in so much water. Hearing that, they try to think of a solution, but Gary and Misty are only able to come up with one answer. They're going to need to put Crystal in a Pokeball. Ash is very against it. One, as he constantly needs to tell and remind people he's not a trainer. And two, Crystal doesn't like Pokeballs any more than Lustre does. Gary places his hands on Ash's shoulders. He understands why Ash doesn't like it, but if they're going to protect Crystal from the water, this is literally their only option. They can release Crystal as soon as they make it to the surface. With great reluctance, Ash takes the Pokeball and holds it up to Crystal, who taps her nose to the button. As soon as Crystal's ball is safely secured in Ash's bag, Gary brings out Cadmar to open a hole in the ship's hull. As soon as Cadmar is called back, Misty brings out Gyarados to carry everyone to the surface. Once they're above water, they begin to scrounge together a raft. Once it's done, Ash immediately digs out the ball Crystal is in and releases her. Having his partner in a ball when he is going to be one of the top international Pokemon rangers didn't feel right. With everyone safely on the raft, Gary pulls out their Pokegear only to discover that they have no signal. Their next idea is to have Aeolus scout for land. However, he sadly comes back empty-handed. From there, events sync up with the canon until the wild Gyarados make their giant twister, sending our group of heroes and Team Rocket to the island of giant Pokemon. The next morning, Gary, Ash, and Misty all wake to find that they've awakened on the beach of an island. Looking around, Ash and Gary are horrified to see that Crystal and Lustre are nowhere in sight. Further compounding this bad news is the discovery that Gary only has Aeolus and Merigold. Nen, Argus, and Cadmar's Pokeballs are gone. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the island, Crystal is being awoken by someone shaking her and a worried voice insisting that she get up. Opening her eyes, she sees the familiar face of Lustre. Getting to her paws, Crystal looks around to see that they are on some kind of beach, and there are 3 Pokeballs next to them. But she can't see Ash, Gary, or even Misty. She asks Lustre where they are, but she has no idea. They then turn their attention to the Pokeballs, which, after a quick sniff, Crystal recognizes as Gary's. Pressing the buttons on the balls, they bring out their friends, who are revealed to be Nen, Argus, and Cadmar. After ensuring that no one is hurt, Nen suggests that they start looking for Gary, Ash, and Misty, recognizing that if they ended up on the island after the twister, then it should stand to reason that they did too. With a plan of action set, they begin to make their way inland, with Argus carrying their Pokeballs with telekinesis. After several hours, it starts to get dark, and Nen asks Cadmar to light the way with his tail, before turning to Crystal, who'd been trying to pick up on Ash, Gary, and Misty's scents. Any luck? No, they mustn't be in this part of the island. You know, now that I think of it, Gary would probably have used Aeolus to scout for us, but with all of the tree cover, he wouldn't be able to spot us. You're right. This was a bad idea. Well, there's nothing we can do about it now. It's late, and everyone's tired. I suggest we set up camp and continue the search in the morning. Upon seeing Cadmar's nervousness, Lustre pats his side gently. Don't worry, Cadmar, we'll find them. Or, hey, maybe they'll find us. Yeah, you're right. It's at that exact moment that Meowth makes his entrance, much to the exasperation of the group, who all ask what he's doing here. With his thunder thoroughly gone, Meowth tells them that he's here to capture them while their trainers are gone. However, this little attempt goes just as well as it did in the anime, resulting in Meowth being tied to a tree while everyone else eats and talks. At Meowth's complaints and demands to be untied and fed, Nen levels him with a hard look and tells him that he doesn't negotiate with rats that threaten his team. Meowth will get food when the rest of them are done and Meowth can be kept an eye on. When the giant Pokemon shows up, Nen begins to lead everyone away until he realizes that Crystal is attempting to untie Meowth so he can escape the danger. Calling over Cadmar, they use the flame on his tail to burn the ropes, freeing Meowth and allowing him to run with them. While they escape the giant Pokemon, Crystal wonders where their precious humans are, and prays to Arceus that they're safe. Meanwhile, over with Ash, Gary and Misty, they are attempting to run from a Zapdos that is several times the size of what an actual Zapdos is said to be. Getting up from the ground, where they'd taken cover, Gary wonders if this island is a dumping ground for some of Rocket's failed experiments. It would explain why the Pokemon are all so huge. Misty suggests that they find some shelter until morning. The next day, our respective groups continue their searches for each other, trying their best to avoid the giant Pokemon that roam the island. Eventually leading to our heroes winding up in a runaway minecart with Jessie and James, then all of their Pokemon. When they crash through the Zapdos, they notice the mechanical parts and realize that all of the Pokemon must have been machines. Then, spotting the boat, Gary returns all of his Pokemon except for Argus, whom he has teleport their group onto the boat to safety. On the boat, they then hitch a ride to the port and get back on track. And that, everyone, is where I'm going to leave the story for now. Join me next time as our group find themselves encountering environmental issues, continue their journey to Lavender Town, and meet two very interesting individuals. I'm Rune, see you next chapter.